Boker Tov, good morning. Today is Friday, December 31st, the last day of the month of the year 2021. I want to take us back to the 12th century and a legend of King Arthur. It was the 12th century poet Robert de Boron who adds the tale of the sword and the stone to the legends of King Arthur. It tells the story of Merlin the magician who has already secreted away the young child, the baby Arthur, from his father's home to be raised somewhere else. And over the course of time, and we're not really interested in too many details here, Merlin has set it up so that he's going to have a grand magical test of who should be the heir and who should take up the role of King of England in a very tumultuous time. And what he does is in a churchyard in Westminster, he places an anvil, and in the anvil is a sword is stuck into the anvil. And there's an inscription on the blade of the sword which reads, according to this legend, "Whosoever pulleth out this sword from this stone is right wise king born of all England." And when Arthur is 15 years old, Merlin brings him to this stone, and in front of in front of a lot of people, there he goes. Nobody else has managed to be able to pull out the sword, and everybody who's a pretender to the throne and is desirous of the throne is unable to do so. Here comes this young 15-year-old and extends his hand, and his first try pulls out the sword. And it comes loose. The crowd cheered, as described in one presentation of the story. Arthur was crowned King of England. That's the legend. And this seems like it's a well-known legend. I imagine many of you listening to me are familiar with it. But you should know that it wasn't really Robert de Boron who created or first framed a legend like this. It's actually one that's found in the Pirkei de Eliezer, let's say 1,100 years earlier, 1,000 years earlier, that reads as follows. Listen to this midrash. In Pirkei Eliezer. Rabbi Levi Omer, Rabbi Levi said, Oto mateh hamateh shenivra ben hashmashot. The Mishnah actually tells us that there are 10 things created during twilight. We've talked about these in the past. Anything which is unnatural, supernatural in this world is the Midrash, the Mishnah wants to insist to us. It doesn't happen in the world itself. It doesn't. It's not really capable of happening once the natural order has been put into place. So we have a series of things, a list of 10, and some changing numbers of 10 things which must have been created during twilight at creation time, just at the end. And so those were things kind of slipped in which are non-natural that will have their place in the world. And one of the things on the list is hamateh, the staff. Let's see. So that staff was passed down to Adam Harishon Migan Eden, and he passed it on to Chanoch, and Chanoch to Noach, and to Noach to Shem, and Shem handed that staff over to Avraham to Yitzchak, Yitzchak to Yaakov. Yaakov brought it down to Egypt, and he handed it over to Yosef, his son. Kishemet Yosef, when Yosef died, Ushalu Beito, they ransacked his home. Can you imagine the Egyptians ransacked his home to take his things? And it found its way to the chamber of Pharaoh, Pharaoh's chamber. So the legend goes, and many times the rabbis have insisted that Yitro, who we only meet when he's living in Midian, that's a Kohen Midian, but Yitro, Moshe's father-in-law, was once an close advisor to Paro, and he was Michartumei Mitzrayim, one of its sorcerers. He saw that staff and the signs that were on it, or the letters, otot being letters or signs that are on this staff. And he desired it for himself. He took it. Apparently, he secreted it out of there and planted it in the garden of his house. And from that point forward, nobody could come near it. Like it was repelling people in some way. Okay, move forward. Moshe kills the Egyptian, flees Egypt. In last week's parashah. makes his way to Midian to a well, saves the girls, and the girls bring him back to their home, Yitro's home. So he enters Yitro's garden. He sees it. Kishaba Moshe l'toch beito nichnas legan beito shel Yitro v'ra'at hamateh v'kara et ha'otot asher alav. He read the letters or perhaps the signs that were on it. V'shalaf yado l'kacho. He was able to extend his hand and just take it. Wow, just like Arthur, King Arthur. V'ra'at told you 1,000 years earlier. V'atau told Yitro Moshe, of course, much more than that, because the legends told in the Midrash, and it goes back, preceding that 1,500 years. And so Yitro saw this. V'amar zeh atid l'golat Yisrael mitzrayim. He said, this one is indeed destined to redeem Israel from Egypt. So that's a continuing story then, right? Somehow the divine proof of who is meant to be the leader and the redeemer. Arthur draws the sword from the stone. Moshe draws the staff from the ground. But that's, I would contend, not the only message that's there to let you know that this is the sign that Moshe is indeed the leader. But rather, the whole first part of the Midrash wants to tell you something about this mateh. And this mateh, which brings a lot of suffering to the Egyptians, one plague after another is carried out through the staff of Moshe, all the way through to the Kriyat Yam Suf, the splitting of the Red Sea, and the Egyptians, drowning beneath those waters. So that's not magical, we're told, but it's a miraculous thing. I don't know if we're only meant to see it that way, that Moshe can be the slayer of so many Egyptians and the avenger for the Jewish people. It's about the redeemer of the Jewish people. What it means to be redemption, to lead redemption, is not to just be the one who's going to bring the suffering, but more significantly, that isn't the message of Mateh itself at all. And all of these plagues, it is the way in which the world is supposed to learn about God and justice, and the Egyptians will meet God's justice for what they've done, but it's more about helping the world know that God is, and to share God with the world. It will happen with difficulty with the plagues, but ultimately Moshe continues to be the redeemer of Israel, and the mateh is dropped, as it were. And it becomes the word of God that Moshe continues to use to help spread that word about God. Moshe's teachings that will begin at Mount Sinai and then continue through all his life. That's really what makes Moshe the redeemer figure of note, because he's conveying the message of who God is in this world. And that, my friends, is what we can do even if we can't draw a staff from the ground or a sword from the stone. What we can do is lead lives in which in which God's message continues on within us and amongst us and with one another. And God willing, it shouldn't happen through more suffering, God forbid, but through sharing a message, a lofty message that began not even at Sinai, but began at the moment of creation. And we continue to share with this world. May we play that role ourselves as the continuing redeemers of Israel and God's message too. Wishing you a Shabbat Shalom.